Hey everyone, let's jump right into this. Today we're talking about something that is deeply personal yet universally shared, Alzheimer's disease. Whether it's touched your own family directly or maybe someone you know, the shadow this condition casts is just absolutely massive. I mean, we're talking about a disease that accounts for roughly 60 to 70% of all dementia cases worldwide. In this explainer, we're going to break down exactly what this disease is doing on a biological level, the incredible human toll it takes, and the massive scientific efforts happening right now to stop it.
To really wrap our heads around the scale of what we're dealing with, just look at this number, 50 million. As of 2020, there were roughly 50 million people across the globe living with Alzheimer's disease. It's a staggering punctuation mark on the reality of global aging. And it's a huge reminder that this isn't just some rare, isolated condition, right? It is a full-blown global health crisis.
So, here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll cover the reality of Alzheimer's. Then, we'll go inside the degenerating brain. Next up, identifying the disease. After that, we'll look at the heavy cost of care. And finally, global impact in research.
All right, part 1, the reality of Alzheimer's, symptoms and progression.
The way this disease progresses is honestly just ruthless. A lot of the time, the very first sign is simply having trouble remembering recent events, which, is super easy to mistake for normal aging. But it doesn't stop there. As it advances, patients start experiencing disorientation. They might easily get lost in familiar places, and you'll see severe mood swings and behavioral changes start to creep in. Eventually, folks tend to withdraw completely from society and even their own families. In the final, most heartbreaking stages, patients gradually lose their basic bodily functions. And tragically, following a dementia diagnosis, the median life expectancy is usually just 3 to 12 years.
Moving on to part 2. Inside the degenerating brain, the biological conflict.
Which brings us to the biggest biological question of all. What is actually causing this? What is physically destroying the brain's neurons and severing all those critical synaptic connections? Why does the brain literally shrink and fail over time?
Well, the answer comes down to two medical terms you've probably heard thrown around: amyloid plaques and neurofibrillary tangles. Basically, you can think of these as malformed, misfolded protein roadblocks. Instead of doing their normal job, these proteins clump together inside the brain. They act like this biological trash that the brain just cannot clear out, and they completely disrupt healthy cell function. Over time, these clumps lead to the irreversible degeneration of the neurons.
So, why do they form? The causes are a really complex mix of your environment and your genetics. Currently, the absolute strongest genetic link we know of is a specific variant, or allele, of a protein called apolipoprotein E, which normally helps metabolize fats. But beyond your DNA, your life history plays a huge role. Things like a history of head injury, clinical depression, and even high blood pressure all significantly bump up your risk of developing the disease.
Part 3. Identifying the disease, the diagnostic turning point.
For a really long time, the history of this disease had a pretty dark reality. Actually, scratch that. It wasn't just dark, it was incredibly limiting. The only way doctors could definitively diagnose someone with Alzheimer's was post-mortem, by examining the brain after the patient had already passed away. But today, medicine has totally changed the game. We now have sophisticated in vivo diagnostics, meaning we can test people while they are still alive. Thanks to advanced brain scans and testing fluid biomarkers, like spinal fluid, doctors can literally see the disease process happening in real time. This is a massive leap because it allows for much more accurate, timely care planning.
That brings us to part 4, the heavy cost of care, societal impact.
So who is actually getting this disease? Estimates show that Alzheimer's affects about 6% of all people aged 65 and older. And it's worth noting that it does affect women more often than men. Now, 90% of these cases are what we call traditional onset, striking after age 65. But the really crucial takeaway here is that remaining 10%. Up to 10% of cases are early onset. That means this disease is devastating people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and mid-60s, just totally upending their lives right in the prime of adulthood.
And of course, the impact doesn't stop with the patient. Because patients eventually lose the ability to care for themselves entirely, the burden of this disease falls incredibly heavily on caregivers. Families are dealing with this agonizing mix of social isolation, intense psychological strain, exhausting physical labor, and just massive economic pressures. It literally takes a village to care for someone with advancing Alzheimer's, and the reality is that the current system relies heavily on the unpaid, often unseen labor of loved ones.
Finally, part 5, global impact and research, the future outlook. If the human cost didn't completely grab your attention, get a load of this. $1 trillion. That is the estimated annual global financial burden of Alzheimer's disease. To put that into perspective for you, if Alzheimer's were a country, it would be the 18th largest economy in the entire world. It is an almost incomprehensible amount of money, entirely drained by healthcare costs and lost productivity. It's a crisis that's putting a massive strain on economies everywhere.
But that $1 trillion price tag is exactly why we're seeing such massive institutional pushback right now. The U.S. National Institutes of Health has budgeted a staggering $3.98 billion for Alzheimer's research for fiscal year 2026 alone. Over in Europe, the EU's Horizon Europe program awarded over €570 million just in 2020 for dementia-related projects. These aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They represent a coordinated global counterattack by scientists and health funders who are determined to finally crack the code of those amyloid plaques and tangles we talked about earlier.
So where does that leave us? The bottom line right now is that there are no known treatments that can truly stop or reverse the progression of Alzheimer's. Some medications can temporarily help with the symptoms, but the biology itself just marches on. But we aren't completely helpless here. It turns out lifestyle factors remain our best current defense. Regular physical activity, maintaining a healthy diet, and staying socially engaged are absolutely huge as we age. They are our best known methods for reducing the risk of cognitive decline. It kind of leaves us with a provocative question. With billions of dollars being poured into finding a cure for tomorrow, what daily choices are you making today to protect